Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today, I'm going to go my review of NXT's Battleground. Starting off the evening, we go to our first match of the night. It is to crown the new NXT Women's North American Championship in a ladder match, or North American Champion, I should say, for the women. It is Sol Ruca versus Jada Parker versus Michin versus Fallon Henley versus Lash Legend versus Kalani Jordan. I thought it was a good match, man. It was a decent match. It was a back-and-forth match. Sol Ruca, she hit a moonsault to the outside. Ruca and Lash then both exchange. Lash then gets thrown out of the ring, lands on a ladder that looked absolutely brutal on the outside. Sol then hits two Soul Snatchers in the middle of the ring. Kalani then hits a moonsault on Michin on a ladder. And then Kalani ends up climbing the ladder, grabs the belt, and your winner of the match and new NXT Women's North American Champion is Kalani Jordan. Couple things I want to say about this match, man. Number one, this was, like I said earlier, a decent match. It was not a bad match. The one thing I will say that was really cool about this was obviously everybody was anticipating what the UFC Apex Center was going to look like with NXT. Now, my first impression was, and I've seen UFC fights out of the Apex Center, and it's not a big arena. It's really not. And from what I understand, even at the NXT Battleground event last night, a lot of people were saying that the seating arrangement was very tight. And it's not a big arena. It's not a big place to have, a full-on wrestling event or a full-on UFC event like you would see at the O2 Arena or the Prudential Center, stuff like that. So obviously the arena is going to be a lot more smaller than what you're normally seeing for like a UFC event or UFC pay-per-view or a WWE PLE. It's going to be a lot different. Hence the reason, for example, WWE's going to Glasgow, Scotland this weekend for Clash at the Castle. So obviously it's going to be a humongous arena. It's not like you're having an event at Minute Maid Park or anything else like that. So obviously the UFC Apex Center is going to be a lot smaller. So obviously the seating was a lot more tighter than what it usually is for a standard NXT event. But my first impressions when I was seeing this match and seeing the arena, I thought, maybe we might get something similar to what we all used to see back in the day when NXT used to have their events at a Full Sail University. But it really wasn't, it had no comparison to that. And to be honest with you, I feel like the crowd really wasn't there either, which I'll talk about more towards the end of the podcast. But the match itself, this ladder match, was really good. It was actually to crown the first ever NXT North American Women's Champion. So, again, NXT's doing a lot of big things, not only for the roster, but for NXT. So, this was great. Hats off to Kalani Jordan for getting the win in that match and becoming the new first ever NXT North American Women's Champion. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the NXT Tag Team Championships. It is Anderson and Gallows versus Nathan Frazier and Axiom. Again, I thought it was a decent match, man. It was a back-and-forth matchup between both teams with Anderson and Gallows keeping the pace throughout the match. Axiom ends up hitting a Spanish fly off the top rope, which allowed Nathan Frazier to hit a Phoenix Splash off the top rope, pins for the 3. And your winners of the match and still NXT Tag Team Champions are Nathan Frazier and Axiom. A couple of things I want to say about this quickly, too, man. I honestly, if I had to do a preview and predictions for this, especially when it pertains to this match, I was kind of hoping that Gallows and Anderson would have gone over and became the new NXT Tag Team Champions for multiple reasons. One, they are a strong tag team, a predominant tag team within WWE or NXT for that matter. And right now, even with everything that's going on with AJ Styles and obviously, the OC, there's a lot of stuff going on in that stable. I mean, obviously you have Michin, who's a part of that stable now. She looked like she's more of a household name now for NXT. She was also a part of that great ladder match for the NXT North American Women's Championship. So I feel like the OC's all over the place. So I feel like the OC, majority of the OC is on NXT. So AJ Styles, I don't know. I'm not saying AJ Styles is going to go to NXT. I know some people were hinting around that there's a chance that AJ Styles might go back to TNA. Especially with this whole possible working relationship here between NXT and TNA, which, again, I will talk about later on in the podcast. But, again, hats off to Nathan Frazier and Axiom for getting that win in that match and retaining the NXT Tag Team Championships. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a NXT Underground match. It is Lola Vice versus Shayna Baszler. It was a good match, man. I like the concept of the match. It kind of gives off MMA vibes or jiu-jitsu vibes a little bit. They don't have the ring ropes and stuff like that. A lot of it has a lot of similarities to what Josh Barnett does with Bloodsport and stuff like that. So it has a lot of similarities to that. But both of these ladies were, kind of meant for this match. They both have really good MMA backgrounds. Obviously, Lola Vice also fought in Bellator Shayna Baszler was also part of the UFC as well as being a part of the Ultimate Fighter when Ronda Rousey was a part of the UFC. So obviously they both have a little bit of MMA background. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Shayna Baszler also fought for a company called Invicta, which was an all-women's promotion for MMA. So obviously they both have background in mixed martial arts. So it kind of just fit the narrative of this matchup. It was a good match, man. It was a back-and-forth match. Baszler was keeping the pace throughout the match. She also applies an ankle lock on Lola Vice, but the hold's broken. Lola then applies a submission of her own, and then Shayna quickly applies a submission on Lola Vice, but the hold is broken. Vice then hits a spinning back fist on Shayna Baszler, knocks out Shayna Baszler, and the referee ends up stopping the match, and your winner of the match is Lola Vice. Hats off to Lola Vice for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a triple threat match for the NXT North American Championship. It is Wes Lee versus Joe Coffey versus Oba Femi. I thought it was a good match. It was a back-and-forth matchup. Oba was keeping the pace throughout the match. Oba and Coffey both exchanged in the middle of the ring with Wes Lee hitting a springboard Pele kick. Gallus come down to the ring to attack Oba. Coffey then hits a springboard moonsault. Wes then hits a springboard Pele kick, but Oba ultimately hits a pump-up powerbomb, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match and still NXT North American Champion is Oba Femi. Hats off to Oba Femi for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night, the match that everybody was anticipating, everybody was waiting for. It is Roxanne Perez defending the NXT Women's Championship against TNA Knockouts champion Jordynne Grace. I thought it was a good match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Perez and Grace, with Grace keeping the pace throughout the match. Grace then hits a muscle buster on Perez for a near fall. Perez then gets up, hits a springboard moonsault on Grace. And then we have, I don't want to get this name wrong, but Paxley comes out to the ring. She is trying to steal the TNA Knockouts champion, but she is stopped by Dana Brooke. I believe her name in TNA is Ash by Elegance. I'm pretty sure that's what her name is. But she comes out to the ring to stop Paxley from stealing the TNA Knockouts champion, which causes a distraction with Jordynne Grace, which allows Roxanne to hit her finish, pins for the 3, and the winner of the match and still NXT Women's Champion is Roxanne Perez. Hats off to Roxanne Perez for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our main event of NXT Battleground. It is Ethan Page versus Trick Williams for the NXT Championship. I thought it was a good match, man. It was a back-and-forth matchup. You know, Ethan Page was showing a lot throughout that match, a lot of improvement from Ethan Page as well as Trick Williams. But Trick Williams ultimately got the victory in this matchup and retained the NXT Championship. A couple of things I want to talk about with Battleground, though, quickly before I get out of here, man. Number one, do I think the event was a great event? It was a decent event at best. I'll say that. I don't think, and full disclosure, I didn't go into this watching NXT and giving you guys a review thinking, oh man, this is going to be exactly what NXT takeovers were back in the day with the black and gold brand. I did not think that at all, and I was going into this event with an open mind. I did not think it was going to be like the old school NXT takeovers because those days are long gone. So I was going in there with an open mind. Obviously, the entire event, a lot of the excitement around Battleground was due to the fact that we were going to see NXT for the first time versus TNA. It was a big deal, and it is a big deal, not only for just NXT, but for WWE and TNA combined. It's a big deal. Now, where this partnership possibly goes between, NXT and TNA, I have no idea. There's been a lot of speculation that, there's a possibility that TNA might go out of business or TNA might be up for sale. And WWE might be swooping in to try to purchase TNA. That could be a possibility. I know TNA's had a lot of ups and downs here as of late. They lost some household names within the company. And most notably Scott D'Amore, who was pretty much the, VP, if you will, of TNA Wrestling. They ended up letting him go. So, I don't know what TNA has up their sleeve. I don't know what they're going to be doing. But do I think it will benefit both parties to be working together as far as NXT and TNA is concerned? Absolutely. To be honest with you, if you're a fan of NXT, this might be a hot take. I have all the respect in the world for Roxanne Perez. She's a great wrestler, a great champion. But they lost a lot of names for NXT. And I'm not talking about, the black and gold era. I'm talking recently that I think really is kind of hurting NXT bad. Braun Breaker, Baron Corbin, Dragunov, Dijak, Carmelo Hayes. the brand just seems like it's not on life support, but I feel like it's a brand that is just not what NXT used to be. And again, I'm going to reiterate for one last time, I'm not expecting NXT to go back to the black and gold brand, but what NXT is doing now, and I feel like what Shawn Michaels is doing right now with NXT, they're not using the old format as far as going out and scouting, independent talent. The talent that NXT is bringing in is talent that's literally have never wrestled ever in a ring. They were showing vignettes and video packages throughout the night, and you see some of these wrestlers that are either already debuted with NXT or currently making a name for themselves in NXT. And there was a female wrestler for NXT, and the only thing that she's done within the NXT is, or where she came from, was that she was a cheerleader for the University of Minnesota. And the other, I don't know the other person or where they came from, but a lot of this, basically what I'm saying to you, long story short, is they don't go out and reach out to independent talent like they used to do when Triple H and Shawn and William Regal were running this, colossal company with NXT. And I think they 100% got away from that. A lot of the talent that they're getting now absolutely have no in-ring wrestling skills at all when they first come in. And I guess that's a part of NXT's Level Up program that they have, where they go out and they scout, these athletes from all over the world, all over the country, especially collegiately, whether it's, cheerleading for a university or a former football player or, a D1 lacrosse player or Division II basketball player. I mean, that's where, Triple H, or I should say Shawn Michaels at NXT, that's how they're building their rosters. And again, I think there is some pros in that, but there is definitely some cons in that. And, yes, hats off to NXT because they continue to keep building wrestlers. And that's what they do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's a humongous failure. And I think there was a little bit of that last night with NXT Battleground. I think a lot of the hype went around Jordan Grace and Roxanne Perez, and rightfully so. These are two promotions going head-to-head, the best versus the best, in the same ring, especially for NXT. It's a big deal. But with that being said, after what I watched last night, I can honestly tell you guys, man, and I'm not going to sit here and lie to y'all, there ain't no way in hell I'm covering NXT. It's just not, it's not my cup of tea. I think NXT, from what I remember, if you guys were NXT fans, I know you guys, some of you guys are. I mean, NXT Black and Gold, I think people need to realize, and myself included, of how spoiled we were when it came to professional wrestling, especially pertaining to NXT. We will never, ever, ever see that again. That will never happen again. The abundance of talent that walked through Full Sail University and the NXT takeovers, the commentary with Mauro Ranallo, and the way that Regal and Triple H and Shawn Michaels created these superstars within NXT is just, we'll never see it again. And the moments, the matches, the storylines, man. I've always said, and I know a lot of people are big fans of Mauro Ranallo, and myself included, but that is one specific person that I know of as far as commentary is concerned that can literally sell a match like sliced bread. The way he gets you involved in the match and gets you hyped up, those NXT takeovers, I don't know about y'all, but for me personally, I would sit there with my wife and watch these takeovers, man. And credit to my wife, she is a wrestling fan, full disclosure, but she doesn't know a lot about wrestling, at least not as much as me. But she's trying, and I would give her credit on that. But when I introduced her to NXT, and the takeovers, man, she was so excited. She was excited. She was like, "Oh my God, this is awesome." And she really was in tune on what NXT was doing. And every time they had a takeover, man, it was like almost like Super Bowl weekend. And for all intents and purposes, maybe this is just my opinion, but some of those takeovers back in the day were doing a lot better and had a lot more, in my opinion, a lot more views than some of the WWE main roster pay-per-views were getting. In my honest opinion, NXT takeovers were literally, no pun intended, were literally taking over of what WWE was doing, hands down. And like I said, man, just the roster and the abundance of talent that they had and the storylines that they created. I mean, whether it was, Aleister Black and figuring out who attacked him backstage, or the great storyline and great matches and matches with Gargano and Ciampa. I mean, those matches were phenomenal. Undisputed Era and how they run roughshod on NXT with Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, Bobby Fish, Roderick Strong. I mean, those guys ran NXT. Authors of Pain, FTR. It's just Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens. All those guys came from NXT, and look where they're at now. That's not what we're getting right now with NXT, and that's why I'm not going to continue to cover NXT, because it's not there. For all intents and purposes, I thought, like I said earlier, the show was decent. Could it have been better? Yeah, a lot better. And I feel like just the entire package of NXT, the production is down, the talent is down. And I'm not trying to take away everything from the talent, but I know they're bringing in Julia, and I know Julia's a big name over in Stardom, and from what I understand, they're bringing in Julia, and she's going to have one hell of a run with NXT, just like how Asuka did, where Asuka was undefeated. She was the Empress of Tomorrow. Nobody can beat Asuka. Who the hell is going to beat Asuka? And I feel like that's what NXT is going to do with Julia, and I think it's a great idea. I think Julia is going to be a stable for NXT for a few years, where you're going to want to see a match with Julia. And obviously there's AEW talent that went over to NXT. Obviously Brian Pillman Jr., who is Lexus King. And I think it's great for Pillman. I do. And I mentioned that before when Pillman went over, left AEW and went over to NXT. I think NXT can do really great things with Pillman. To me, honestly, it'd be great to see Pillman have the loose cannon character, but I know they won't do that because of his dad, stuff like that, and that was his dad's character. I get that. And then you see Ethan Page. And Ethan Page is an interesting character, man, because I feel like Ethan Page, he's one of those guys where, does he have the talent? Yeah, Ethan Page is talented. I'm not going to take away what that guy's done in the ring. No way. But could you put the entire company on a person's back like Ethan Page? I don't think so. I think there's certain things that Ethan Page is lacking. And obviously certain things that he's successful in. And that goes for everybody, myself included, everybody, watches the podcast, everybody. You're not going to be great at everything that you do. That's just the way of life. That's just the nature of the beast. But if I was running a wrestling company, would I put my entire company on the shoulders of Ethan Page? No, I will not. I will not. I think, will it benefit Ethan Page with being in NXT? Yeah. But I feel like it's not as bad as Jericho, but I feel like the well is kind of run dry for Ethan Page. There's not much that you can really get invested in with Ethan Page for right now. Now, I know he only had his first match with NXT. Give it some time. I get that. I just don't know how they're really going to build up Ethan Page for the foreseeable future, whether it be NXT or a possibility for him going to the main roster. So that's the biggest thing. Trick Williams, I think Trick Williams is great for NXT. I think he's earned his due. He's paid his due. Obviously, him working, with Carmelo Hayes at the time and learning as the time went on, and he's a great champion for NXT. And the entrance music is great. Everybody's a big fan of, his theme song, and myself included. It's a great entrance. It really is. Even when he came out to the ring last night, it was awesome. But I will say this. I think a lot of things have changed with NXT. And as a fan, am I, super keen on reviewing NXT from here on out? I'm not. I'm going to be honest with y'all, man. I'm not going to lie. This might be my one and done, live. I wouldn't say live, but more recent NXT review I would do for the foreseeable future. The company, it's lacking something for me, to be honest with you. But again, obviously the most important thing and the biggest thing coming out of Battleground last night was obviously Roxanne Perez versus Jordynne Grace. To see WWE, broaden their horizons and willing to work with other companies. This is something that I don't think anybody would have said WWE was willing to do, or was even a possibility to do when, Vince was taking over WWE at the time. This was never happening. And now that Triple H is, kind of creative control for WWE right now, I think a lot more doors are starting to open for WWE and the current talent that works under WWE. And I think it's a big deal, and people can say what they want, but it obviously has a little bit to do, obviously, with what AEW is doing with Forbidden Door. They're both, Tony Khan and Triple H, they're both keeping an eye on each other. Absolutely. And rightfully so, because, at the end of the day, it's smart for business. Obviously, AEW is working with New Japan and CMLL and Stardom. I'm sure WWE want to kind of, a piece of that pie, whether it's, WWE working with AAA or working with, New Japan or working with Stardom or something like that. Obviously they want to keep those business relationships open to benefit both parties. And rightfully so. It's a great business move. But as far as last night, like I said, man, it was mainly about Roxanne Perez and Jordynne Grace. And I am very interested to see where this partnership, if you will, goes between NXT and TNA. I'm very interested in that and see where it goes. It's not something where, I'm going to keep 100% eyeballs on and see what the hell's going on, but I'm definitely interested in see what happens. I am. I know Jordynne Grace has a match coming up. I believe it's the pay-per-view is Against All Odds. It's an open challenge match. A lot of people are saying this might be an opportunity for Roxanne Perez to come over to TNA to have a rematch with Jordynne Grace. So obviously there's going to be a little bit of back and forth here between NXT and TNA, which I think is really good, not only for both, for NXT, but as well as TNA. So, and it's great for wrestling and great for the fans. So I'm all for that. But this is my review of NXT's Battleground. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.